and welcome to Politi-Talk Centered, where we invite you to have the conversation. I'm your host, Sandman.
And I'm your co-host, Holland.
Thank you for joining us today as we discuss the topic of communication and why understanding each other is so important. So, to start off with, I wanted to kind of reiterate our kind of mission statement and how it relates to this episode as a whole. I know the motto that we kind of have on all of our pages is have the conversation. And that's also the title of this episode is Have the Conversation. So what that basically means is the reason that we started this and that I was inspired to start this kind of podcast and Discord group was because so much we see people having very strong opinions and very strong ideals, which is perfectly fine and right to have, but not talking about it in a way that is conducive and productive. You know, everybody has their own viewpoints, and we shouldn't be trying to, force them upon other people, but, definitely we need to be able to find the way to talk and help people understand those things. And that's what we're doing. We want to take people from all walks of life, whether politically speaking it's on the left or the right, and bring these people together and have the conversation. Talk about why it is we feel about things a certain way or why we believe things a certain way. And at the end of it, not trying to change anybody's viewpoint or opinion, but at least walking away understanding those people and why they believe what they believe, and to be able to respect that. There are some things that, some topics that will be definitely controversial, and at the end of it, to agree to disagree, but to at least have heard out each other's sides and arguments. So that's kind of our mission statement that we have.
Like you said, it's more to find that common ground and be able to respect each other's belief systems. And nowadays, like you said, it's became pretty toxic and harsh when it comes to each other's differences, for sure. And this podcast, like you said, is just more to, be able to find that common ground, because nowadays it's more, hey, it's my way or the highway. And I don't care what you think, what you believe in, and it's more of a selfish-sided conversation. Like we want to have a selfless conversation. We want to be able to be like, hey, this is my view. This is what I believe in. This is what I think is going on. And, if someone doesn't agree, hey, that's fine. But as long as you can respect and understand where I'm coming from, hey, this is great. That's common ground.
Exactly. And that really ties us into our first main point is cancel culture today. We have, a lot of people that feel certain ways. Like you got this whole tearing down of the statues, and, there are many people that, on one side have very good reasons for why they think that these statues should be removed, whether it be the racism at the time that, could be tied to that individual or whatever else. And then you have people as well on the other side that are fighting to keep them up because of, heritage and stuff, and just, a pride in one's, history and like either your location or your family. There are many people in America today that, they're descendants from great Confederate leaders and figures. And, that doesn't mean that you stand by and for, everything that they believed in, whether it would be slavery or whatever else, but you have a pride in, in your lineage. And so, there's equal arguments to be made on both sides. So with cancel culture, the first thing we want to look at is, like, there's this created mob mentality where you get, a couple loud voices in the room, and then kind of everybody kind of starts piping in with it. You have that catalyst voice that kind of says what people are thinking, but not everybody necessarily wants to say it. But as soon as somebody breaks that silence and says it, a lot more people are willing to jump on board with it and back it. So with the mob, it's really easy to follow because psychologically, people are very social creatures. We want to be accepted amongst our peer groups, amongst our friends, and in general within our community that we immediately reside with. And so when you start getting more and more people that are going a certain way, you're going to have kind of like these middle ground people where, you know, you're not like a activist, kind of level of personality. You're not, out there actively, pushing things. But when the people around you are kind of starting to say a narrative, you socially and psychologically you want to follow suit just because you want to remain acceptable and accepted in that group. Um, and one of those issues is with peer pressure.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like so you see it a lot happen definitely nowadays, especially on social media, because when you see a couple hundred people, or when you see a post or you see a video of something, and you end up going into the comment section, or you're on YouTube and you go into the comment section and you see that the majority of the the comments are supporting this or against this, then yeah, it's kind of like an active peer pressure or passive peer pressure, like you talked about. It's it's more going to, like, that person's going to more likely follow the mob.
Yeah, because it's if it and we'll get into this in a second too. But it's like what determines it is you will change your behavior to conform with the group mentality as long as it doesn't violate any of your core belief systems. As long as your core beliefs aren't being violated, then you're very likely to slightly alter how you act or what you say to remain accepted within the group. And it's true, and so I'm glad you brought up social media too. One of the biggest things, psychologically speaking, is if you're in a public place in person with a group of people, you're much more reserved because there's a human element there that kind of forces you to have safeties and filters on how you act and what you say. And when you have social media, you're removing that human element. It's like almost like if you were just to talk to a computer, a robot, or a wall. The same mentality is there, and that you don't feel a human connection, and thus you lose that kind of that filter safety that comes with social interaction, and you're much more able to say those inner thoughts, those deep inner thoughts that you usually wouldn't say, because there isn't this like present fear of repercussion. Like whatever you say, it doesn't matter because they're not here with you and they can't really say anything or get in your face about anything. There's a big divide there between social media and being in person and being able to voice things. So that's also definitely a major additive into that.
Yeah, definitely, because it's people, like you said, they want that safety, and being over on like social media or something, you can basically say whatever you want and not have to worry about repercussions at all. Um, in person, it becomes different because you know now you have repercussions. You have potentially of actually being in a physical altercation. You have to physically talk to this person and physically deal with them. When on social media, you can say what you want and basically ignore them when you don't want to talk.
And one of the things that I wanted to get into was the difference of active and passive peer pressure. So with active peer pressure, it's a situation where you're in person or at least in communication with somebody, and you're being actively pushed, egged, and forced to do something that you would rather not do. Even if it's just encouragement, Trying to, like, if you're sitting in the car with people and, everybody's kind of been like, go faster, that's an act of peer pressure. So that way, you have an outside influence on you, a direct outside influence. Passive peer pressure is more like, you're with a group of friends, or not even with a group of friends, just in general, a group of people are doing something, and it becomes kind of socially acceptable. When that happens, that creates an environment in which there's no real active pressure on you to do anything, but because something is a social norm, it is a kind of pressure for you to do it as well, or at least to open you up to it, like, oh, I guess I can do that because everybody else does it. So that's kind of a form of passive peer pressure, and you see a lot of that with social media too. Both of them, active and passive. But just like when a lot of people are starting to be a specific way, you get this kind of passive pressure to where you want to be accepted, or at least you don't want to do anything unacceptable. And so that's this kind of passive pressure.
Yeah, for example, I can give you the perfect example of a community that I'm a part of on Facebook. It's a gaming community of Destiny 2. Every time you see on there, whenever someone, posts on there, like a video of themselves or something, the norm is literally the shit talk them.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, oh, dude, you suck, or, anything. And it becomes a passive peer pressure that everybody else just chimes in. And if anybody does say anything that's out of the norm, typically, like, they're going to get negative flashback as well.
Yeah.
It becomes more of a passive peer pressure at that point that, hey, this is the social norm in this group. Anything different, is more likely to get that flashback. And it's not like active at all, like, they're making you do it. It's just more of like, hey, this is just the everyday norm on this community.
Yeah, and though you can see that as like that's the normal behavior. People view that as a positive behavior, and like you said, nobody's making anybody do that. Nobody's making people get derogatory comments and stuff put towards them. But you see that is acceptable, and that people not necessarily maybe praise it, but you get positive feedback from doing that. And so yeah, that is a passive pressure to do that, and to gain community acceptance, which is what it all boils down to, is being accepted by the group or community that you reside within. And so where that becomes an issue with peer pressure is, okay, so you have active and passive peer pressure in these climates of whatever the topic is, or the reasoning is. And so then how the mob escalates at this point is the demands of the group become more and more extreme, and more precise. It kind of, you start with it's very easy to start with a very vague kind of topic that everybody can agree with. And then as voices become more prevalent, and as more people egg each other on by having the same narrative, that's when you start to get these more extreme positions. Because now it's like, oh, this behavior is completely acceptable by this group that I'm in. So you begin to push the limits and test the waters. And so now those internal dialogues you have that you would have never have said begin to slowly manifest. And you get where, talking on, racism and culture and stuff, things that we probably would have never have said before, now people are vocalizing because, it's the next step in. It's, the next new topic. You're at a vague area, and you work your way in. And so you get this pleasing the group narrative, and trying to kind of one up in a way. It's like, in one day, this is how it is, and this is what we need to do. And then the next day, you escalate it up because you want to please the group, and you're like, look, I'm for this, I'm pushing the envelope. And that's how you get this mob escalation, because it's basically a feedback loop of of ideals and beliefs, and there's nothing opposing it in there. There's not a secondary belief that's in there as an opposition to whatever the narrative is, and you get just like this kind of feedback loop that people just keep feeding each other. They listen to the same news that's telling them exactly what they're thinking, and you don't hear anything else from the other side. And so there's it's very easy to get into a rut where you go from a vague kind of easy to follow narrative to these much more outlandish, out there, escalated viewpoints, and that the only reason it's working is because of that feedback loop. And there's nothing in there telling people like, no, maybe you should think about that. What about this? So that's kind of how we get this mob escalation.
Yeah, definitely.
So going into more of the psychology aspect of it all, social identity and social identity theory. The definition of social identity is the portion of an individual's self-concept derived from perceived membership in a relevant social group. So kind of what we were saying before, but basically you have this idea, you have this internal concept that you get from how you see your membership, your wokeness in a specific group, and that identifies you with that group. With social identity theory, Henry Tajfel developed the theory back in the 1970s, and I know like a lot of people are kind of arguing that social identity theory's been around since the dawn of man, which it really hasn't. It's a new concept, relatively new, within the last couple decades, just about. It's less than a century, not even close to half a century. So it's a pretty new theory, but it makes a lot of sense. So with social identity theory, basically what you get is a us versus them kind of narrative. It's how you really bring the group in together, and it's very easy. It's very easy to feel exclusive with a group when you have people talking about and thinking the same thing, and then you pit yourself against another group or other groups, plural, because they're not thinking the same way you are. And so it's very easy at that point when you start having this exclusivity with a specific group, that you begin to group other people into their own groups. And it's not that they put themselves in those groups, you put them in those groups, and kind of segregate them into whatever social grouping metric that you're using.
You can definitely even use high school as an example.
Oh, absolutely.
Back in high school, I can give you an example from when I was in school. I was grouped in with the emo kids because I talked to a few of the emo girls, and like you talk about, we organized them in that particular group, not us. So yeah. That's that us versus them in a way. Like you're basically, just because, hey, this person talked to this person who definitely is in that group, so that kid or that person is definitely in that group. So it's really easy to do that in that mindset. Like, for example, if you hang around, the redneck kids, you can obviously be put into like a redneck stereotype. It's amazing on how like other people instantly group each other into stuff.
Yeah. And I think with the way the social structure is made, psychologically, that's just kind of in our nature. Naturally, we want to organize things as humans. We organize things and we categorize things. If you give a child, a bunch of toy blocks and stuff that are different colors, they might put them, together like based on shape or maybe on color. I know like you get like a bag of Skittles. and you dump them out, and you're just killing time in class or something, you'll probably move them all into little sections of their own colors. It's naturally built into us to kind of organize things in that way, and that goes into this, I think, too. The other problem I have also with social identity and how it divides people, making the us versus them. You're literally creating your own enemy sometimes. People that would normally not even care about you or what you thought, just by simply grouping them that way, and having a, doesn't have to necessarily be negative outlook on them, but just a different opinion of them simply because you group them a specific way. You're literally setting yourself up to create enemies from thin air that otherwise would never care about you, or at least care about your opinion and stuff. They're indifferent. Not that they don't care, they're indifferent to it, and could potentially have been an ally.
For sure. I mean, we've all done it to people without ever realizing it, making an enemy of a person that, like you said, could be an ally. It happens. I know I've done it quite a few times myself, putting someone in a certain group and, making an enemy out of them, to the point where, like, I mean, to be honest, I've done it to you before in high school.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like, and the other thing too is, you look at a lot of the people that are not necessarily leading these groups and stuff these days, but who are following it. It's younger people. It's people between the ages of probably as young as 12 up to 20, 24, 26. And looking back, in high school and stuff, I mean, you do, when you're young, you do stupid shit. I mean, it's a miracle, honestly, that many of us make it to adulthood, even with today's technology and stuff. It's amazing, we survive, and I think that part of that also is kind of a guy thing. I think, and people might say like this is a sexist standpoint or something, but I do feel like guys do a lot more dumb things than girls, just personally. The average guy just really stupid stuff, and part of that is there's this kind of machismo, impress people kind of mentality that's built into us, where we want to be cool, we want to outdo our peers, we want to impress people. And so I think that's part of it, and then couple that natural psychology with the mind of a child or a teenager, and you can get some really really stupid decisions.
And not only that, you also got to think about like social standards too for males, in a way. Like culturally believed, like we shouldn't cry. If we just get hurt, we just stand back up and brush it off and deal with it. And that plays a lot with with our our mindset too, because at that point, that's where we create that. Hey, I gotta be the center of attention. I gotta be the cool guy. I gotta have a lot of friends. I gotta be able to do this. I always got to win, that kind of scenario. And then we do those stupid things like, hey, let's make a freaking zip line through the trees. That's more likely to get our break.
It's like, and I think that kind of goes into one of our future talks with kind of involving social norms, and definitely one that we're going to be having soon with I don't know how to really describe it. Basically, male culture and stuff. We're going to be talking a lot about that in the future, but that definitely is definitely a real thing. But yeah, and getting back into the social identity theory. So there are stages to this. So three of the main stages you see are categorization, social identity, and social comparison. So categorization is obvious. You kind of categorize people. You put them into little groups like high school speak. You got your preps, you got your jocks, you got the nerds, and the emo kids and stuff. That's where you begin to categorize people based on either appearance or attitude, or maybe financial status. There's a lot of things that and it's interesting to see how the young mind, even though we don't really understand much of the world, there's so much that we do that really applies to the real world in adulthood, because it's not maybe as bad per se, but those things still exist. That hierarchy of categorizing, carries on with us. The next thing was social identity. So basically, uh, how how you identify yourself um, as a person. Social identity is like your internal perception
Of who
um,
you are in a group
of who you are.
membership.
Yeah, and most of the times, who you are kind of defines that group membership. But at the same time, if it's a very vague group membership that grows into something more extreme, and you're a person that doesn't necessarily hold very strong beliefs, your social identity can warp and change over time because of your identity with a specific category. And then the third was social comparison. So now that you have all these categories set out and you have identified which one that you apply to, you begin to compare everything. You begin to compare others. You find, and it's so much easier to compare negatives between people than positives. We rarely think about the positive. You think about, there's a worker and he's been, working someplace for, 40 years. He's, goes to work every day, early, and he's a star player. But then, one day they screw up or do something, or they're late, and you don't care about, all that time that they did something good. It's very easy to just be super focused and emotional on the negative, and that's where social comparison really presents the issue with what's going on right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's not only towards other people, it's like towards yourself because let's say you're we'll use like band for example, or strings class or something, like you got the people, let's say you're playing the violin and you're okay at it, but you're not the best, but you're always social comparing yourself to the star, student or the, star player on the team. You're always, gonna even identify and compare and evaluate yourself to each other, to other people. It's it can definitely play a lot with who you are and your belief system and what group you were in. I mean, even nowadays, like we all social compare each other to other people. Like for me, for example, I'm always social comparing myself to the best sales rep in my job.
Yeah.
You it's just what we do. Like when we go to a new job or when we go do something, anything. Like even if we go do sports or something, you're going to compare yourself to the other person. That's it's always a perfect example of social comparison. Women do it all the time when it comes to other women, like with your wife, your girlfriend, your sisters. I can't tell you how many times with my sisters that I've always been told, like, hey, do you think I'm okay, like compared to like this girl, or there's definitely always like going to be that social comparison, and it all goes back to social identity and the categorizing ourselves, everything.
Yeah, and I think it also goes back into kind of a instinctive, natural instinct that's built into us. Um, the so Have you ever heard of like the sensory deprivation studies and stuff like that?
A little, not entirely.
So with sensory deprivation, basically, you can be in a white room. It's very padded, so there's very little sound reverberation. Everything's very plain. A true sensory deprivation would be they're basically these kind of water chambers that they're salt water, so you float very easily, and you just lay there. There's no sound, there's no light, and essentially you're just floating, and it creates these kind of out of body experiences for people, um, and which is good. But in the white room experiments where there's nothing for you to do, people Vsauce did an amazing episode on it. I really loved it, and I think it was like for 48 hours or something. He was in this deprivation room, and I mean he was going kind of crazy. You play with your thumbs, you find things to do, but we are naturally creative creatures, and that's part of our growth of mind and self, is that we're always going out looking to either do something, make something better, or better ourselves, and I think that's a natural instinctive thing in us for survival in general. If you didn't go out and learn how to make a spear, then you have a much less chance of survival. So that kind of internal creativity, I think, plays into the psychology of social identity, and how is kind of built into us. And the important thing is that we have to be able to identify that in us and understand what's healthy and what's not. And that kind of goes into the other part of the theory, talking about in groups and out groups. So your in groups are who you identify with or what you identify with, and the out groups are what do not identify with what you identify with. And so once again, it's reinforcing that us versus them kind of mentality. And that's the issue. What it ultimately boils down to is just the verbal mindset of this is my in group. This is the people that jive with me, and they don't. You don't. By doing that mentally inside your head, you are negatively perceiving someone. Even if you don't think ill of them, you are negatively perceiving them as not with you, not for you, not a part of who you are or your group identity. And thus, you're setting up for, if there ever is a negative narrative, like in the aspect of racism in America, now it's much easier for you to attack people because of that out-group mentality. They're alienated from you. They're not your people. You don't care about that person or anything to do with them because they're not part of your in-group identity. And so it's much easier to attack those people at times for no reason other than how you identify with your group and them.
Yeah, for sure.
And if any of you would like to look into more of social identity theory, we will have a reference link in the description that you can look up the study that I read for this talk. But that kind of wraps up the social identity theory. The next thing I wanted to get into was cognitive dissonance, which is still related to the theory, but we're kind of branching out from it. So basically, in cognitive dissonance, a person in one group goes against a group, and mentally, either the values must change, or the person is excommunicated from that group. So basically, if a superstar that a lot of people are fans of. There's a couple examples I can't remember off the top of my head, but this happens all the time. Somebody in Hollywood does something, and people love that person, but as soon as they do this, either the people that love this, because it's two conflicting thoughts. The one thought on one side is, I really love this person, I really respect this person, and I've always enjoyed their work. And the other thought in conflict is, I'm completely against what they just said and what it stands for and what it means. And so you can't have that conflict continue. You have to resolve the conflict in your mind. And so in order to do that, either you change your value system so that the person is now realigned and everything's on the same page, or they get excommunicated. You no longer support that person. You no longer view that person in that group.
And it's not only even towards groups, it's even towards oneself. So always an example that I learned in psychology was when people smoke, that's behavior. And then when they know that smoking causes cancer, or they know smoking is bad, then that creates the cognition. And then that creates the state of the cognitive that we're talking about. It creates that. So, it can even be oneself, for example, like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely, on a day-to-day basis, even if it's kind of like at the microscopic level, you do mentally come across things that you either change your perception of something and your your value system, or you change you get rid of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens every day, and I just think when we talk about cancel culture, that's really what it is. Um, what it boils down to is you have people toeing the line, and then all of a sudden they say one thing that is against what the group stands for, and either the group has to change, or they get completely removed. And the horrible thing, the sad thing about it is most of the times these people get totally attacked. I mean, it's a complete 360. One minute you're chanting the same thing with all your friends, and the next minute they're hypothetically beating you on the ground. Not literally, but hypothetically, and it's just vicious.
Yeah, like definitely. I've been in instances like that a lot before. Like I'll give you an example. I mean, so me myself being a Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine. You know,
Hmm.
I don't really believe in that once when I got out of the military, because it's either the only thing that's going to make me feel like a Marine is like when my family brings it up, or when I'm talking to my buddies who I served with, or my buddies that are in the military. That's the only time. Other than that, like any other time, if I come across another Marine or something, in reality, am I treated like another Marine? No, not really. Typically, no, not at all. Does the VA treat me like that? No, not at all. I get the saying all the time, but you know, I don't agree with the once a Marine, always a Marine. You're just like anybody else in the service. Once when you're out, you're out. That's it. But because of my mindset of that, I get a lot of backlash. I get a lot of shunning. I get a lot of, oh no, that guy just doesn't understand, or physically, like, not physically being beaten down, but definitely getting beaten down.
Yeah, kind of like on a verbal and emotional level.
Yeah, for sure. So you can definitely make, like, everybody can at least say they experienced it in some way or form, and it's easy. It's easier than you think to get shunned out of that group, to be beaten down.
And that's the truth. It's very easy, especially when the group is as a collective attacking somebody. It's very easy, and I think that's the problem. Is it's we don't think of the group on an individual basis. We're just all individuals. We see the group and we want to please and conform to the group, and so when the group's attacking, you attack as well, and that's the easy route. And like you hear all the time, the easy way isn't the best way. Usually, it's the hardest decisions are, and the right way is usually the hardest thing to do. Um, and that's where talking about having the conversation really comes into play. That's what happens when we stay silent, and we don't voice how we really feel, like how we truly feel something. We talk on one side of the spectrum where the group lets you kind of come out with those things that you normally wouldn't say as an individual, but at the same time, the group retroactively does the exact opposite, and it forces people to hush other thoughts that are against the group. That kind of voice in your head saying, this isn't exactly right, but you don't act on it because of the peer pressure. And so, and that's where things really actually get dangerous and things really get violent, is because it breeds this environment of ignorance where you're not listening to any other side. You're not listening even to yourself. And in that environment, in an environment of ignorance where nobody is listening and nobody is looking at the facts, ignorance breeds fear. Fear breeds hate, and hate breeds violence. And it's time and time again. You can apply that to any real situation, even like with wars and stuff. With ignorant stuff. World War I is an amazing example. Somebody was assassinated. There was a lot of ignorance as far as what actually happened. That ignorance bred fear amongst those countries, and that fear, we hate fear. Humans as a species and as individuals, we hate fear. We don't know what it is. We don't know what there is. We need to know things. And so when you don't know things, you're afraid. And when you get afraid, you get angry because it's it's not normal. It's not right, and you don't know how to fix it. And then from that anger comes violence, and then thus you get World War One. So that's probably the biggest problem with and I'll go ahead and say it. I'll take the heat for it. But with the George Floyd situation, there was definitely, I'm not, and I'll say this right up front just so that the record's straight. What happened to George Floyd was absolutely an atrocity, and the officer was brought to justice. He was charged, I think, decently, and the other members that were there with him that didn't do anything were also charged. So justice has been served, and it was served extremely swiftly. And outside of that, with what happened to George Floyd was horrible. I don't think I've heard a single person say otherwise yet. With that said, there was an ignorance as far as what all was going on with that. People weren't asking questions. They were just taking things at face value. All right, and this ignorance of fact and reasoning led into this fear and hatred amongst each other. You don't talk about the other side, and people just start saying racist this and that, and then that's where the hatred comes in and the violence. And the George Floyd situation is very complex. There's a lot of factors that go into what transpired into the riots, but it was definitely a large spark in that. So it's extremely important that when we feel passionate about something, when we feel we get that kind of tunnel vision of narrative in our minds, it's extremely important that we take a moment to step back and think and listen and just talk. All right, what, like, for like one thing is like, why did that officer do what he did? I don't think I've heard that question once ever. Why did he do it? That would be the first step in trying to understand this situation and actually getting a solution. But no, we don't ask why. We don't try to understand what transpired. We skip straight up to racist blaming and rioting. And that's the problem. We need to have a setup where people are listening. And that's the narrative that I want to push forward is, what is it like on the other side when no one is listening to you? Like, put yourself, if you're, a hardcore Black Lives Matter activist, put yourself in the perspective of someone you've had an interaction with. I want you to think about what that was like. Whether or not they were a true racist or not. What was it like in your interaction with them? And if you're a person that is on the other side of that, let's say you make the statement, all lives matter, and you get attacked, like that you're racist and Black Lives Matter, that's the problem right now. Step back and consider what their side is coming from. We need to try to understand each other. All right? The problem is saying you're the problem.
Yeah, for sure. Because even like with the proactive, with the Black Lives Matter, the first thing, there's a lot of people that say, hey, all lives matter. They want to, not ask, those questions. They don't want to understand better. And so they just assume that, hey, they're saying that no other life matters, and they're saying that only their lives matter. But that's not the case. It's like a rainforest, okay? When someone says, hey, let's save the rainforest, they're not saying that, the rest of the forests in the world are pointless and that we shouldn't care for them. They're just saying, hey, this particular forest needs our attention right now. It needs our focus to try and help save the rest of the forest. And it's the same thing, like, we're all human beings. Like, we get it. Like, we're all lives matter. I get it. But at the same time, I morally understand the Black lives. It's basically like saying, hey, we need to save the rainforest. We're just saying it, hey, our particular brothers and sisters need our help right now.
Yeah. And it's like, you can't save the world, with one mission statement. You don't go outside and say, like, today I'm going to end, all the injustices of the world. No, you go out and you say, what's affecting my community? What's affecting the people I care about? And absolutely, in that case, the Black Lives Matter movement has a lot of responsibility, honestly, to do that. And I think kind of one issue with the platform itself is that they don't recognize that they're trying to fix a bigger picture than themselves, and they're completely neglecting their communities and the people closest to home that they can actually help. And that's the thing, you can't change the world in one day. You can't change the world by yourself. It takes time, and it takes, finding people to help you, that support you, and to make a difference, one step at a time. Start small, and it'll get bigger. um, and so, like, talking about the happy middle of communication, um, maintaining a healthy balance between the values that you hold and the ability to listen and understand others without necessarily changing your belief or their belief is an extremely important place to start. If there's a problem in America, blaming people isn't how you're going to fix it. It is taking the time to talk to your adversary and learn and understand their perspective, and then vice versa, talking to them and helping them understand yours. When two people come together and understand each other, there is no room for ignorance, and there's no room for fear and hate, because you diminish it. You gain an understanding between each other. And I'll put a link in the description as well. But there's some videos on our playlist called "Have the Conversation," two TED Talks in specific that are very good on this topic. And hopefully, I would love to get an interview with one of those individuals sometime in the future. I'm kind of working on it, but we'll see how that pans out. But definitely check those out. But anything you'd like to kind of summarize so far?
I mean, I think we definitely pretty much touched the subject pretty well. For those who are watching or listening, if you have any great summarizations or anything, we highly support it in our group chats. We support it in our comments below. As long as it doesn't go against, anybody's ethics or, race or anything like that, then, it's all good.
If you feel like I'm missing the point in something, or that you don't agree with me, join our Discord. I would love to have a conversation with you and learn why you feel that way. I honestly would, and I would hope that hopefully you can learn from me and why I believe what I believe. And that's kind of the first step. That's what our real mission here is to understand each other. Yeah, to learn from everybody.
Sure, because I mean, you're never going to learn from each other if you're always keeping, being closed-minded. And this group is for sure all about being open-minded. Like, we're open to each other's ideals and stuff. We're open to each other's views, beliefs. It doesn't matter, okay? As long as it's not like getting in the way of each other's pursuit of happiness and stuff, then hey, this is great. Like, it's okay to get heated in the conversation. It's okay to get upset at each other. But in the end, as long as you can still respect and, come to an understanding of each other, then hey, that's what this group is about, is just coming to it. Coming to an understanding with each other. It's not about trying to prove who's right and who's wrong. It's just trying to find that common view, and we're more open to that discussion to understand why you feel like we're in the wrong, or why you feel like you're in the right, because that's what we're here for. This is what Politi-Talk is about.
Politi-Talk centered.
Yeah, Politi-Talk.
So, coming up next, we go off the rails as we talk about random topics and just have fun. Those of you that are listening on YouTube, our discussion ends here, I'm afraid, but check out the link in the description and join our Discord for the full show and other great discussions on the forums that I'm really looking forward to having with you guys. Thank you for listening, and thank you for having the discussion.